Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'd like to start by introducing ourselves, as this is a joint presentation between CalTire and CanmetMINING, part of Natural Resources Canada. My name is Mark Good. I'm the Director of Business Insights at CalTire's mining division. And my co-presenter today is CanmetMINING, a senior data scientist at CanmetMINING. Last year, by way of introduction, year CalTire installed around $360 million of 57 and 60 mining customers, full trucks in Canada. And I'm focusing on Canada just as we've got a good, complete data set for the region. Now, only a small percentage of this tire work is currently being planned. And little research has been done, in Canada at least, looking at the impact of tire fitment strategies on truck availability or the cost in terms of lost productivity. And we think this is a gap. Tire management isn't just about maximizing tire performance. We feel it's also about considering the impact that tire work to achieve that tire performance on fleet availability. And Emma and I would like to share with you this morning some initial, or this afternoon, depending, or this evening, depending on where you are, some initial findings into research conducted by CanMet for CalTire. Thank you, Dominica. Next slide. Now, I'm going to start with a tire-related safety share. This is a tire-related safety share, and very simple. The first graph on the left it shows tons moved across selected Canadian mines in 2019, and this is aggregated production data. And as you can see, productivity or production is generally higher during winter months in Canada, where amongst other reasons, we have more consistent underfoot conditions. Unfortunately, it's very cold and icy. But that leads to higher average truck speeds without generating heat issues in tires. However, if you look at the next slide on the right, to the right of that one in orange at the top, this shows the number of tire changes per month across the ensemble of sites that we manage and do service for in Canada. And it's pretty much the opposite of the productivity visual. Our work is least during winter months, but spring breakup and heat in the summer really drives more operational damage and more increased workload on the summer months. And at the bottom, I've sort of just mapped a summary of all our safety incidents that, for whatever type, whether that's equipment breakdown, property damage, loose wheels, or unfortunate injuries, over an ensemble of 3 years, and we see there's a high degree of correlation, at least in many months, between the amount of work we're doing and the amount of incidents, unfortunately. And what's the takeout from this? And learning in terms of asset management and planning is really, can we flatten the curve, if I can use that term? If we can spread out workload for tire work more equally throughout the year, can we also potentially have a safety gain, lessen the amount of safety-related incidents during that period? In short, if we can plan tire work better, can we make things safer? Thank you, Dominica. Next slide, please. Before we get into research, I'd like to take you through some underlying assumptions that we used in the research. Next slide, please. The prize for us is, can we reduce the amount of tire-related downtime, as well as potentially spare stock inventory levels? And if we look at those 57, 63-inch tire works, the ultra-class large trucks that most open pit mines use in Canada, we've got this $360 million worth of tires used in the year. We used a few educated assumptions as a basis for the research, And these will be different, of course, from mine to mine and commodity and region. We have the downtime events out of our system, $1,000 an hour as the hourly cost of truck loss production, and an average of 8 hours of total truck downtime each time we bring a truck out of service and do tire work. Of course, truck downtime isn't just the time it takes to physically change a tire. There's travel, there's maybe wash bay, there's queue work, and other delays. In total, the amount of tire work we do in a year to manage those $360 million of tires is around $245, $250 million of potentially lost production. And almost half, 45% of this work is the fitting of new tires themselves. Alongside this, these same customers typically have $50 to $60 million of spare tire inventory to manage and keep those $360 million of tires running. And our thought was, coming into this, if we put a bit of attention to it, and if we could reduce both the downtime length of time and the inventory by, say, 15%, there's potentially a $25 million productivity cash saving in the mining industry, which seems like a fair-sized prize. And we said, well, can we use the data we've got to build a model that will allow us to reduce tire-related downtime by putting around fitment strategy? And we turned to CanmetMINING for help. Next slide, please, Dominica. And again, a word about the data. And sorry, this is just an internal CalTire plug here, if I can. We have a time management system called TOM, Time and Operations Management System, which is a software we use to manage, as the name implies, our tire and service operations for our customers. TOMS is relatively new. We've been gradually rolling it out for the past 4 years now. And today it's implemented on about a third of our customer sites globally. And that's around 120 primarily mining locations from the Yukon down to Queensland, from the West African tropics to the Chilean Andes, the Sonoran Desert. And above all, it's over 5,500 pieces of mining equipment so far, and 140,000, in fact, 160,000 tires in the database today, all using a common language. The system has 2 primary goals. One, to allow us to manage our service operations in a consistent and measured way, only using the same measures, the same KPIs, the same service delivery attributes across each of our operations. And secondly, to look for insights and learnings that we can share with our customer base to improve mining productivity, and of course, look to reduce our operating costs. Next slide, please. Before I hand over to Emma, two slides to illustrate the challenge we face and the research question we asked CanMet. Next slide. Now this is very much tire fitment 101, very much for open pit mines, and apologies if I'm covering elements that you already are well aware of. Starting on the left, typically with regards to tire management, we fit new tires to the front axle of a haul truck and then rotate them to the rear. Why? There are 3 primary reasons that we have on the slide. 1, safe operation, keeping the operator safe and fitting above the front axle. 2, tire performance. Typically, tires on the front suffer less damage. Leaving them on the front for longer generally will increase tire performance, and this is especially true in hard rock mines. And 3, spare tire management. If we're only fitting new tires to the front, then we must be fitting spares on the rear. And for this to work mathematically, for us to have sufficient spares, it typically means rotating tires off the front axle at a 3rd life. Some sites do a 2nd rotation from rear left to rear right for for safety reasons, they ensure that tires end their life facing into the berm in case of impact rapid inflation. Now, this creates a couple of potential issues. I'm not going to go through those at the bottom left. Either rotating too early or too late has impacts, and both can increase downtime. The other challenge we face, especially here in Canada, is the issue of seasonality. We have seasons here. The demand for spare tires is not constant. And if we look at the test site, and there's some data on the top right, and this is one of the 2 sites that CanMet used to build their model, we see a distinct summer peak of work. The demand for spare tires, these are the gray bars, to replace damaged tires or scrap tires increases. And this in turn also increases the demand for new tires in orange as well. And if we drill down to look at just the rotations on the test sites on the bottom right, we can see the number of rotations per month, and the orange line is the actual hours at which rotations happened. Rotations is taking a new tire off the front, typically a third life, and rotating it to the back to make it into the back. There's a very marked S-shaped curve. This is not good. And from July onwards, from mid-year, we can see that the rotation hours when we took the tires off the front dropped sharply from around 2,000 hours on this site down to close to the back. And this is in order to generate spare tires to replace damaged tires that were taken off the rear of the truck. And during this period, the spare stock cover on the site was consistently less than a week, or essentially hand to mouth. And as a result, in 2019, at this site that we looked at, the site incurred around $500,000 of additional downtime or lost productivity, bringing trucks out of service to create spares. And unfortunately, this is a picture we see at a number of sites. And in particular, it looks like the sites in geographical areas with distinct seasons. 3 main impacts of this, negative impacts. One, it creates more truck downtime at exactly the wrong time of the year, at the busiest time of the year for tire work, which exacerbates the peak of tire-related downtime. We're doing removals off the rear, and we're doing removals off the front. Secondly, it's putting the tire teams under more pressure and an increased workload, with therefore a higher risk of potential incidents. And thirdly, it can decrease overall tire life or increase spend. Pulling tires early to fit them to the rear increases their risk of operational damage from the rear fitment. Thank you, Dominica. This is the question we asked Emma and the team at CanMet, and what we hoped for as possible outcomes. And as we'll see, they came up with a number of ideas that challenge some of our current thinking, and they look very promising to continue to test across different sites and geographical regions in the months ahead. Emma, thank you. Let me pass things over to you.
Thanks, Mark. And Dominican, next slide, please, or maybe 2 slides probably. Just a little bit about my background. CanmetMINING is a part of Natural, and we work in partnership with stakeholders to develop and deploy green mining technologies, as well as conduct research and development across all of a mine's life. And our team's specific research focus is on data-driven solutions for productivity and energy efficiency. So this is a great opportunity for us to offer our research expertise on improving productivity, given the background that Mark just laid out for us. So let's dive a little bit into the data here. So the following results are from 1 mine and 1 tire type. So as Mark mentioned, tire failure shows obvious seasonal trends at Canadian sites, which on the left, scrap tires by month really oscillate over that 5-year period. So this can make it difficult to put into. Oh. Okay, I think that was an accident. I'll keep going. So this can make it difficult to plan to generate the appropriate stock to cover these periods of high tire demand if rear tires fail early, while maintaining the 1/3 life rotation pattern and only fitting new tires to the front axle. From historical tire failure data, we estimated that had all tires been fit new to front positions, this would have required a rotation benchmark of approximately 28% of full life in 2018 and 25% of full life in 2019, so both below the 1/3 life rule. To keep trucks running, we found that tires are sometimes fit new to rear positions during high demand seasons to mitigate the effects of low tire life and low stock. And we also found what we call stolen events. So this is when there's no used spare tire that's available to replace a failed tire. So a truck is taken out of production to have a tire rotated off of it and fit to the truck that needs it most. So this generates downtime for both of those trucks now. So we'd like to avoid this situation at all costs. Based on average downtime costs, the total cost of stolen events between 2018 and 2019 are equivalent to about 10 brand new tires. So we've been able to find some evidence that in some cases, and certainly for the test site we're considering here, the 1/3 life strategy is not generating enough spare tires to carry out this rotation strategy effectively from season to season. So this all begs the question that if we observe that the rotation benchmark fluctuates, as well as tires are being fit new to rear positions during periods of increased demand, then what is the rotation benchmark and rotation strategy that produces the best results in terms of inventory and truck downtime, and in order to generate enough spare tires to fulfill demand and eliminate those stolen events? Next slide, please. So to try to solve this puzzle, we've developed a method to model the movement of tires, and we'll call it the rotation benchmark model. Spare tire inventory can be modeled as the balance between tires that are entering the system as new fitments and tires that are exiting the system as scrap being sent to repair. So if the difference between those two is positive, it'll increase the inventory level, and if it's negative, it will decrease the inventory level. So our initial idea was to first determine the target inventory level based on the tires that are leaving the system from the previous month, and then based on that previous month's spare inventory level and the number of tires that are leaving the system, the rotation benchmark would be defined based on a set of rules. So the spare tire level is then calculated for every month, and the process continues month to month. So really, basically, all we're doing is we're going to define our spare stock target for the month to decide whether we need to change tires more often, less often, or at the regular interval. Next slide, please. So to do this, we have two target inventory levels that we define, which are the high and low inventory level based on historical trends. So if the number of tires exiting the system in the previous month was low, we'll choose the low target level. If the number of tires exiting the system was high, we'll choose the high target level. And then we defined 3 frequencies for new fitments at positions 1 and 2. So these are new fitments to the front of the truck. Those are the base frequency, which is the usual. We'll do a rotation after 1/3 of the tire's life. The high rotation frequency, which is 1/3 of the life minus a month worth of working hours. So we change tires a little bit more often. And then the low frequency. So this is 1/3 plus 1 month of working hours. So we change tires a little less often. So we use these rotation benchmarks to run 3 tests. One test where we use only the base frequency, one where we add in the high rotation frequency, and then the last one we use all 3. And then also, because we observed that new tires are being fitted new to rear positions, we'll also explore this as an alternative rotation strategy towards the end. Next slide, please. And one more. So we'll dive into some of the results here. So in the first experiment, we saw how a dynamic rotation benchmark impacts truck downtime and inventory when tires are only fit new to the front position. And then we compare the model predicted average against what actually happens with the actual average inventory, and then the same thing with the number of trucks that were being sent to the shop. So first off, a feasible solution is one that never ran out of spare inventory. So if during the experiment we saw negative inventory, the solution was deemed not feasible since it didn't complete our objective of eliminating stolen events. So for 2018, we see that the 1 frequency method didn't generate any feasible results, and that was kind of to be expected because if you remember from the beginning, if all of the new tires were fit to the front positions, the rotation frequency would have had to have been lower than 1/3 of the life. So as we start to introduce the high and low frequencies, not only do we get feasible results, but the results seem to improve as more frequencies are introduced. So we get better results using 3 frequencies rather than 2, and 2 obviously more than 1 because we don't have any feasible results. So this suggests that the base frequency alone can't support the rotation strategy, and that additional frequencies or at least modified frequencies might be able to reduce truck downtime and manage spare inventory. There were no feasible solutions in every case. In in every case in 2019. So this could indicate two things. One, that the rotation frequencies weren't set at the appropriate intervals to generate the right amount of inventory. So this could require performing a sensitivity analysis study to pick more optimal benchmarks. So instead of adding plus or minus a month's worth of time, maybe it would be more appropriate to add a week or 2 weeks worth of time. Or two is that the alternative fitment strategy would perform better than fitting only new fitments to the front. So we'll take a look at that on the next slide. So the next experiment allowed for tires to be fit new to rear positions. When we allowed new fitments to positions 3 and 4, we were able to generate feasible results in almost every case. So in 2018, we saw a reduction in truck downtime in every case and an increase in spare inventory. And we know that due to the number of stolen events that occurred, spare inventory was critically low at some points. So increasing inventory might have been necessary depending on the objective. If that was to eliminate stolen events, then new fitments to the back would in some cases require higher spare inventory. And in 2019, the one fitment frequency method still didn't produce feasible results. However, we saw that the best performance from the 3 fitment frequency method performed the best. And this method estimates a reduction in both spare tire inventory and truck downtime. In the 3 frequency case for 2019, the reduction in downtime is equivalent to about 160 hours. And if we go to the next slide, I'll just try to summarize all of these results. So this dynamic benchmark method would likely eliminate stolen events by having better control and better understanding over the number of spare tires needed to rotate to generate the right amount that need replacing. However, sometimes reducing spare stock is impossible since low spare inventory leads to stolen events and more downtime. A higher spare level could mean better overall performance. So as far as downtime, our method showed a 14% reduction in truck downtime in the best case when new fitments were made to the rear positions, and a 7% reduction in truck downtime when fitments were only made to the front axles. So this could suggest that it's worth considering new fitments to the rear during periods of high demand. And it's unlikely or it's inconclusive that the amount of downtime reduction that we saw translates directly to improved productivity, but it does demonstrate that a dynamic benchmark can reduce truck downtime by making use of spare tire inventory when appropriate, and that this can allow the tire technicians to generate stock during low demand periods of the year and then focus their resources and their manpower on performing tire changes during high demand seasons. As next steps for this, we'd like to see a sensitivity analysis study performed to fine-tune the model, as well as test the model with data from other sites and other environments, and even other mining operations. And then once that's complete and the model is refined and tested theoretically, we'd like to implement it and test it in the field at a site on some real live data. So I'll hand it back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks, Dominica. Can we have the last slide, please? Thank you. I think to wrap up, the key question we had was, is there potential with this? And we certainly think so. We certainly see that a dynamic rotation benchmark model clearly does have potential to reduce downtime and help us manage spare inventory better. And above all, the concept of maybe introducing partial fitment of new to rear, specifically to the rear left side for mines that drive on the right, looks an interesting one, and it's certainly a concept that others have raised in the past. I think certainly Autoco did in Australia back in the early 90s. And as Emma says, there's no doubt further work will help improve the model and
Можешь забрать себе.
I haven't learned how to speak Russian. Apologies. At the test site we saw and thank you, Cliff. How much did you miss then? Not sure what I missed there. Certainly there's benefit in this. I think the dynamic model has potential. Work required. We could calculate what the impact of applying the model at the test site would have given us, or given the customer rather, in terms of reduced downtime that could be translated into availability or potentially productivity. And if we expanded that and that was replicated across the other sites in Canada, that comes a 28, almost $30 million opportunity, which is certainly one we will continue to work on. And since this research is done, we are now starting to work with a mining company in Western Canada to try and take this further and test this in a real life environment. So thank you very much for your time today. I hope that was useful, and look forward to chatting during the workshops and offline with anybody who'd like a bit more information or details. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark, for today's presentation. Do we have any questions for Emma or Mark?
Dominica, it looks like we've got one question in the chat. It says here from Zoli, Emma, where do retreads fit into your model, new tire or repair?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Yeah, for sure. So retreads fit into your model, new tire or repair?
Oh, at this specific site, we didn't have tires that were being retreaded. But Mark, you could speak more to this, but I believe at other locations they do retread tires. But for this specific case we were looking at, they didn't do any retreading here.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is typically we see it, the test site we're looking at was 63-inch tires. Many struggle to retread tires that work in that size. So it's a bit of a moot point. I think, Zoli, if we did have a site with retreads, we wouldn't fit them to the front. We treat them as a repaired tire because of the inherent typically damage within them. So they would be a rear fitment, and we would treat them, if they were in the model, as adding into the spare stock that would go to